Joe Brady's initial coaching staff has been set, and it includes a pretty surprising addition that we didn't know about. We'll break it all down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Locked On Bills is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Well, folks, welcome in. Joe Brady has formally set his initial coaching staff, and on today's episode, I want to break it down for you. I want to spend the first segment kind of outlining who he hired and kind of compare some things to last year's coaching staff. And then in segment 2, I want to just kind of break it down, share my thoughts on how I think it all came together. One quick programming note for you. Bill's squad will be Tuesday and Thursday this week. So Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time, Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We planned on it being Monday. We had some things kind of fall apart, and we needed to push it one day. And so it will be Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time if you want to be part of the live audience. All right, folks, let's dive into this initial coaching staff that Joe Brady has hired. And I want to start by first acknowledging the coaches that have been retained from last year and actually got a promotion. There are several of those. And the most interesting one to me is Rob Boris. Rob Boris has been the Bills' tight ends coach. He is now the tight ends coach and run game coordinator. And that's a big deal because we know Aaron Kromer was a huge part of that run game coordination, but Rob Boris was actually a big part of that as well. And so Rob Boris now officially adds the title of run game coordinator. Joe Dana, he's back. He's been the safeties coach the last few years. Now he's the secondary coach, so he oversees the entire secondary. And he's obviously done a pretty good job. We like where Cole Bishop's development has gone. DJ Mangus has gone from offensive quality control coach to assistant wide receivers. Jason Reprovich on the defensive side of the football. Last year, he was the assistant defensive line coach. Now he is the senior defensive assistant. Kyle Shermer goes from quality control coach to assistant quarterbacks coach. And then Alvin Vaughn went from fellowship coach to defensive assistant. So to me, the big ones here are Rob Boris going from tight ends to tight ends and run game coordinator, Joe Dana, safeties to the overall secondary, and really Jason Reprovich in an elevated role on the defensive staff there after being an assistant D-line coach last year. Other coaches that are returning, but in the same role that they were in. Austin Gund. He has been Aaron Kromer's assistant offensive line coach for the last couple of years, and he stays in that role as the assistant O-line coach. Mark Lubbock returns as the pass game specialist and game management coach. Kelly Skipper, who's been the Bills running backs coach for a long time, he sticks around. Turner West sticks around as the assistant special teams coach. And then Millie Wilson will be the offensive assistant / fellowship coach. So a decent amount of last year's staff returning. And obviously there's a lot of new additions to the staff. And so one of those is John Fox, who is now a senior assistant coach. We'll talk about him a little bit more in segment 2, but John Fox, 16 years as an NFL head coach, has been added to this mix. Terrence Jamison is the defensive line coach, and he has been the co-defensive coordinator at Illinois for the last several seasons. John Igorugwu is the inside linebackers coach. He's most recently been the Giants inside linebackers coach. Bobby April, the third, is the outside linebackers coach. Yes, the son of former Bills special teams coach Bobby April. He'll be handling outside linebackers. He recently had a long run as Stanford's defensive coordinator, spent last year with the Vikings as their outside linebackers coach under Brian Flores. Jay Valai is the corners coach. He spent the last few years being the co-defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. That's a big-time hire. That's a guy that had some options and Seems like he's got a ton of upside with him, has done a great job at Oklahoma. Craig Robertson, defensive quality control. Pat Meyer is the offensive line coach. That's a big one. We've talked about that one already, but that's been formally formalized now. He is the offensive line coach, obviously a guy that has most recently been with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but does have several years coaching with Aaron Kromer. Bo Hardigree is the quarterback's coach, most recently the Titans quarterback's coach. And then Drew Terrell is the wide receivers coach, who most recently was the pass game coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals. So several new assistants, including some really big-time up-and-comers. I think you look at Terrence, Jamison, Jay Valai, Drew Terrell as three coaches that have some upside and guys that had a lot of options. Drew Terrell, he interviewed for several offensive coordinator vacancies this cycle. Of course, we already know that the coordinators are Pete Carmichael for offensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard for defensive coordinator, Jeff Rodgers, the special teams coordinator, Joe Brady, your head coach. We've already had conversations about them. But I thought it would be interesting to highlight the coaches that are like outright gone, that were part of the mix last year, that are no longer part of this mix. So let's go through them very quickly. Sean McDermott, of course, the head coach, fired. Aaron Kromer, he retired, the Bills offensive line coach. He is on to being a grandfather and spending time with his family. Chris Tabor, the Bills special teams coordinator, he's no longer in the mix. He's now the special teams coordinator for the Dolphins. Ronald Curry, the quarterback's coach, he's no longer in the mix. That one surprised me a little bit because that did actually feel like a Joe Brady hire. Whenever he was promoted to offensive coordinator, I thought that Ronald Curry, based on some of their time together with the Saints, maybe had, some Joe Brady fingerprints on it, but he is not part of this mix. Neither is Adam Henry, the wide receivers coach. He's now the Steelers wide receivers coach. And look, I mean, Adam Henry does have some success, obviously, coaching in the NFL, but you cannot look over the last few years of Bills wide receivers and feel like a single one of them, other than Khalil Shakir, has come close to meeting expectations. So I'm excited for a new coach in that room. Marcus West, the defensive line coach, he's gone. He went to Tampa to be their defensive line coach. Al Holcomb, linebackers coach, he's no longer in the mix, a guy that had a lot of time with Sean McDermott. Mike Pellegrino was not retained as the Nichols coach. Ryan Nielsen, senior defensive assistant, he's no longer around. He went to the Vikings staff with Brian Flores. Bobby Babich, of course, the defensive coordinator, he's with the Packers. He is now their defensive pass game coordinator. Jamal Adai at corners coach. He goes to Miami to be their corners coach. And then Christian Taylor, who was a quality control coach for the Bills. He's now Wyoming's offensive coordinator. So decent amount of coaching talent from last year retained, but you can see there's been a lot of turnover, especially on the defensive side of the football. Obviously, all new coordinators, a new head coach. But some very intriguing new additions along the way here that have me pretty curious. And so now that we've kind of outlined what the staff is, in the next segment, I want to really break down, some of my big picture thoughts on the group that Joe Brady assembled. So we'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ETHOS.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need to hire the right person, you got to cut through the chaos, and this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And our listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, folks. So we've now established what the coaching staff consists of. Now let's kind of get into some of the big picture takeaways that I have from what Joe Brady put together. And I want to start with John Fox being part of this staff. A 16-year NFL head coach. He was the Panthers head coach 2002 through 2010, the Broncos head coach 2010 through 2014, and the Bears head coach 2015 through 2017. Took the Panthers to the Super Bowl in 2003. He took the Broncos to the Super Bowl in 2013 as their head coach. And this feels like a hire that can really benefit Joe Brady. This is a young staff. In a lot of ways, it really is. And having a guy that has sat in that seat for 16 years across 3 different organizations that brought 2 different teams to the Super Bowl is going to benefit Joe Brady from obviously being able to bounce things off of him, but just his observations in the building, that will be a benefit to Joe Brady. So I think this is a good hire. It reminds me a lot of what the Seattle Seahawks have done with Leslie Frazier. Mike McDonald, of course, their young, outstanding head coach. He's been supported the last 2 years with Leslie Frazier as the assistant head coach. Of course, the Bills' former defensive coordinator. And, obviously I think Leslie Frazier's run his course in the NFL as a head coach. I don't think he's going to get another chance to do that. Just like John Fox. And, that chance is not really going to come. You've kind of aged out of the role and you've kind of settled into different types of things. And that's not the type of perception you have anymore in the league, but that doesn't mean you can't help a coach like Joe Brady, who, at 36 years old, when he was hired, he was hired as the youngest coach in the league. I'm not sure if, Clint Kubiak or LaFleur in Arizona are younger than him, but, Joe Brady, one of the youngest head coaches in the NFL, no experience. Having a guy like John Fox around will be really helpful. And also, of course, John Fox has a lot of time with Brandon Beane. Of course, Brandon Beane now pretty much number 2 in the organization as the president of football operations and general manager. Brandon Beane has stated that Joe Brady had the final say on coaching hires, but you could definitely feel like maybe this is an extension of Brandon Beane in some ways to, help, right, and observe and really maybe connect the 2 departments, help connect the 2 departments, the coaching and the front office, with that time that, of course, John Fox and Brandon Beane have together during their time with the Carolina Panthers. So good addition there. I also love what's happened here defensively in terms of there being a lot of upside with the hires that were made on that side of the football. And of course, no greater example than the defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard. This is a hire I've obviously spoken quite a bit about, and I don't want to rehash everything that I've said about it, but what Jim Leonhard really represents is youth. It represents a completely different defensive philosophy, a different scheme, and just a overall different style that I think is necessary, that I think is more in line with what the best defenses in the NFL currently do. And I'm excited for him to take over this defense. And that's really going to be important for Joe Brady, obviously, as an offensive-minded head coach. And I can appreciate Joe Brady's messaging to this point about, look, that he's not the offensive coordinator anymore, that he's over everything. And I think that he's been very intentional about that messaging, and I think he'll be very intentional about how he distributes his time to have involvement with every phase of the team. But we know that this defensive coordinator hire was a huge one for him, and I don't think I could have picked an option that would have made me more excited. Like if you could say, Joe, you could pick the next defensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, I'm probably going to pick Jim Leonhard. And so that would affirm how excited I am about this move. And so I like the upside, the newness, the change in philosophy, the change in scheme. I think it's all very necessary. But I also like how within the staff that Jim Leonhard has assembled, and I believe that he does have a lot to do with the defensive coaching staff, because that was something he said during his introductory press conference, was that Joe Brady was going to give him, a lot of ability to kind of bring in the people he believed in to work underneath him. And some of those names were pretty attractive. And Bobby April, who 3 years as Stanford's defensive coordinator, last year with Brian Flores, time together with Jim Leonhard while Leonhard was the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. Talked about Jay Valai already from Oklahoma, was their assistant head coach and co-defensive coordinator since 2022, has done an outstanding job with that Sooners defense. Terrence Jamison, who has spent the last 3 years as Illinois' co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. And Illinois over the last 2 years won 19 games. That's the most they've ever won across a two-season stretch. And there's been some good player development there as well. And so you got some of these rising college coaches that I think infuse this defensive staff with a lot of newness and a lot of just a lot of difference, right? Like the Bills have kind of had like a lot of like very established NFL people running their defense. Leslie Frazier, Al Holcomb, Eric Washington, Sean McDermott, John Butler, like very just established NFL pedigree. And now you have up and coming coaches, right, to kind of take over that defense. And I'm excited to see kind of where that goes. So I look at this defensive staff and I see upside, and that gets me pretty excited. When it comes to the offensive staff, I see a blend of familiarity in the right ways, but a lot of new influences that represent some intrigue to me. Obviously, when it comes to the familiarity, I start with Pete Carmichael, who's obviously not familiar to the Bills, but familiar with Joe Brady, familiar with Sean Payton. And, Joe Brady has not been shy about letting us know he's from the Sean Payton tree. And, of course, Pete Carmichael, a couple decades of experience supporting Sean Payton as his offensive coordinator in a non-play calling role. I think that synergy will be really helpful for Joe Brady as he assumes the duties of head coach, but also maintains his role as the offensive play caller. Obviously we have loved what Aaron Kromer has done with this offensive line. And while, Aaron Kromer is not going to coach it anymore, you get two people that are pretty well acquainted with Aaron Kromer, and Pat Meyer, the lead offensive line coach. Meyer was Aaron Kromer's assistant O-line coach in Chicago in 2013 and 2014 when Kromer was the offensive coordinator. He was an offensive assistant in Buffalo. Meyer was in 2015 and 2016 during Kromer's first stint as the Bills offensive line coach. So you have that familiarity, not to mention Austin Gunn, who has been with Kromer the last couple of years. And so I think you obviously have a new leadership. There's no way around it. This is not Aaron Kromer, but you have somebody who's had a lot of time with Aaron Kromer to help maybe maintain a lot of what we loved and, obviously put their own stamp on things. And then, of course, the run game coordinator piece now going to Rob Boris. That is something he was heavily involved with in the last couple seasons. And so that familiarity makes a lot of sense. So Pete Carmichael, the offensive line and run game influences over the last few years, that's kind of all maintained as best you can. But you do bring in a couple of new names here to fill out this offensive staff, and Drew Terrell, who's going to work with the wide receivers. And, he had 2020 through 2022 as the Commanders receivers coach, and then the last 3 seasons as the Cardinals passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach. And remember, he interviewed with the Chargers and Falcons this cycle to be offensive coordinator. He's a young guy. And so I think that gives, the Bills some like freshness, some newness, some youth right into this offensive conversation. In addition to Bo Hardigree, the quarterback's coach, who is 41 years old. He kind of came up under David Cutcliffe. If you know David Cutcliffe, think quarterbacks, think Tennessee, Peyton Manning, right? The great run there. And then, of course, he goes to Duke and has a great run as their head coach. And, so he kind of came up under David Cutcliffe. and then had some different jobs throughout the league, including most recently the last 2 as the Titans quarterbacks coach. He called plays starting in September for the Titans. He also had a stint with the Raiders in 2023 where he was their quarterbacks coach, and he called plays for a good part of that season. So, he's not necessarily been associated with a ton of success, but I like his exposures, and I like that he's kind of had some chances here to be a play caller. And, if there's anything that I would think Joe Brady would be able to get right, it's which coach to have in the room with Josh Allen as a quarterback's coach. So I kind of like just that general thought, knowing Joe Brady and his connection to Allen and the role that he had, and, hiring a guy to be the right fit for the room. And then when it comes to special teams, I think stability. Jeff Rodgers, 16 years on the job as a special teams coordinator in the NFL. And that's something that, will be a major asset to Joe Brady as he's taken on this job as head coach. You would like to know that he can just say, Jeff Rodgers, please God, handle this special teams thing and make sure that it performs at a level that we're happy with, and allows Joe Brady to really focus his time in other spots. I mean, 16 years on the job. Jeff Rodgers knows how to run a special teams department. And, of course, there's some personnel things to figure out, but, nothing should be foreign or weird or strange to him. He's seen it all. 16 years on the job. He's had to figure out all kinds of things. And I think that stability and that experience will be a benefit to Joe Brady in his first year as head coach. So I think he did a great job. I really do. Especially with the defensive piece. You love the experience with special teams. And I think it feels like he got the right mix around him offensively. And so, of course, part of this whole transition from Sean McDermott has been, all right, well, what does this really look like? How different is this staff going to be? And I think the proof is right here. It makes it plainly clear that this coaching staff has been overhauled. It's going to have a completely different look and feel. And, I'm excited to see what this means for the personnel moves moving forward, and the free agents they add, the types of players they draft, and then ultimately what this team looks like. It's still the Bills, it's still Josh Allen, but inevitably, coaches or teams take on the identity of their head coach. And, what does that mean for this group that we've seen play under McDermott for so long? I'm excited, intrigued, curious, nervous, all the things as it relates to what this operation is going to look like on the field come fall. But we know what the staff looks like, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. So hope you enjoyed this conversation to get acquainted with this coaching staff. I'm excited for some of the conversations we're going to have this week, including my next conversation with you, which will be setting Brandon Beane's to-do list for this offseason. We're going to break that all down for you on our next conversation. Don't forget Bill Squad live Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. Eastern time. Tons of content coming your way here on Locked On Bills, so don't miss anything. Just hit that subscribe button. That's how I'm going to be posting most days a couple of episodes. So make sure you always scroll back. You don't want to miss anything. We got great conversations coming to you all the time. So hit that subscribe button. I'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.